are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's exactly 3 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Russian foreign minister has accused the US and EU of ignoring his country's proposals on security. In a phone call with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Sergei Lavrov said Washington was waging a propaganda campaign about possible Russian aggression. Mr. Blinken has since tweeted that any Russian aggression would be met with a resolute, massive and united transatlantic response. Later today, President Joe Biden is expected to speak to his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Former Defense Minister Sir Nicholas Soames says it's looking increasingly likely that Russia will strike.
Very important that diplomacy is given every chance, but it looks to me as though President Putin is imminently awaiting to do one of probably three things. I mean, I think he could either withdraw his troops, he could force a corridor, which he would quite like to do, probably down from Ukraine into the Crimea, or he could launch a full-scale invasion. But if he does, he will pay a terrible price.
Boris Johnson will not lose his focus on the Ukraine crisis, despite being sent a police questionnaire about lockdown parties. That's according to Junior Defence Minister James Heappey. He says the PM will stay focused on leading the international response and continue to attend National Security Council and COBRA meetings. The Metropolitan Police have contacted more than 50 people believed to have attended the parties, asking them to explain their involvement or face fines. The Prime Minister has denied any wrongdoing. A British journalist held by the Taliban for several days in Afghanistan has finally been released. Andrew North was reporting on the country's humanitarian crisis for the United Nations Refugee Agency. Meanwhile, friends of a second British man detained by the Taliban have pleaded for his release. Peter Juvenal was visiting Afghanistan for business and family reasons. He's been held since early December. Experts from SAGE are warning that lifting all COVID restrictions will have a disproportionate impact on vulnerable people. It follows the Prime Minister's announcement that restrictions will end soon, including the need to self-isolate following a positive test. SAGE has also raised concerns about the consequences of removing access to free testing and called for clear and consistent messaging to the public about the ongoing risks. A charity is warning there's a hidden mental health crisis for older people, with millions having lost the confidence to leave their homes. Age UK says the pandemic has had an alarming impact on the elderly, who are now experiencing anxiety, memory loss and disturbed sleep. The charity is urging friends and relatives of older people to reach out and encourage them to ask for help if they're struggling. French police say they've now intercepted 500 vehicles from so-called freedom convoys seeking to enter Paris. Inspired by the ongoing events in Canada, protesters are demonstrating against COVID-19 restrictions. France has mobilised thousands of police, set up checkpoints and riot control barriers to keep out the convoys. So far, more than 300 motorists have been handed tickets. Meanwhile, at least 2 protesters have been detained in central Paris. OK, on TV, radio and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. That's it from me, Miranda Shunker. Will be here after this. OK, looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy and breezy for most, with rain continuing to spread eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. A front sits across the southwest this evening, so you can expect a damp evening there. A little calmer though, still unpleasant at times on the moors, particularly during heavier downpours. Further east, after a relatively dry day, rain will start to affect many parts of the southeast, though it will be largely light. Over in South Wales, after a rather wet day, the rain will ease for a time and it will turn a little calmer as well. Over in the Midlands next, and it'll be a mixed picture there, cloudy and breezy for many, with rain continuing at first, though it will likely turn a little drier by night time, staying mild too. Moving further north, where things stay rather windy in the northeast of England this evening, with a mix of clear spells and showery rain that may be quite heavy in times, as well as being unpleasant. Now, even further north to South Scotland, where it will be changeable this evening. Expect some heavy and blustery showers at times, but also the odd clear and colder spell. Finally, let's look at the details for Northern Ireland. It'll turn a bit calmer and drier for many, though once again short-lived, and heavy showers will push through. For the rest of the night, things will change again as more heavy rain and gusty winds will push up from the south. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
The GB News Tavern has now been declared open. It's Talking Pints, and I'm joined by Toby Young. Toby, welcome.
Good to see you.
To the programme. Now, back in 2012, I'm going to embarrass him now, I really am. Back in 2012, we met at a party. You seemed to be somewhat overexcited at this party and challenged me to some ridiculous juvenile concept of a drinking contest. And I did say, Toby, I don't think it's a very good idea. Well, in the following week's Spectator, this is what Toby Young wrote. I was bleeding at this point, having fallen and hit my head, though you probably wouldn't have noticed on account of the fact my suit and shirt were liberally covered in red wine. Not a good look for a man approaching his 6th decade. Nigel was his usual dapper self, whereas I was lurching around like an OAP on roller skates. I just thought I'd begin by embarrassing you, that's all. Cheers, nice to see you.
Cheers, mate. Yeah. I think I may know your secret of how, I mean, because we did have, of course, your response to my juvenilia challenging you to a drinking contest was to immediately accept, and you then promptly drank me under the table. But I think I know your secret because I suspect that there isn't really any alcohol in that. I think that's a non-alcoholic beer, and I think you may have been drinking non-alcoholic beverages back in 2012, which is how you drank me under the table. I was drinking
Not true, Toby, not true. And I was actually drinking for January alcohol-free lager, but I'm now drinking the real thing. I got to tell you. Now, Toby, you know, Conservative commentator, activist, campaigner. Before we get to the big things that you've done in your life, let's just get right up to date with what's been happening for the last 2 years, the restriction of our freedom, lockdowns. You felt pretty strongly about this from the start, haven't you?
Yes, I felt pretty strongly about it. I wrote about it back in March 2020. I was one of the first journalists to criticise the lockdown, suggest that it might cause more harm than good, and immediately got monstered, was called a Nazi on Twitter. Some people even called for me to be imprisoned because they thought any dissent at that point from the kind of COVID orthodoxy was dangerous to the public. Because I found it difficult to discuss this in the mainstream media, I set up my own website now called The Daily Skeptic. It's become a kind of forum, a meeting.
And does that get you
skeptics.
round being sort of banned or suspended by Facebook and Twitter and all these people?
Well, Facebook has occasionally flagged posts that we've sent to Facebook from the website as containing misinformation. But actually, when you drill down into it and try and find out what it is they're claiming is misinformation, it's terribly unclear. There's no right of appeal. The whole process is completely opaque and we think completely unfair, but there isn't any way in which you can appeal it, seemingly. Twitter have been a bit more tolerant. YouTube have occasionally taken down my videos. They took down a video discussion I was involved in quite close to the beginning of the first lockdown, and I was able to appeal that by pointing out that the other person in the discussion they were accusing of promoting misinformation about COVID was in fact the recipient of the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2014. So when I pointed that out, they put it back up again.
But of course, you're someone that's never been scared of having rigorous intellectual debate. And I just love this. You know, the fact that you authored a book published in 2001, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. I mean, you are an agent provocateur, aren't you, by nature?
Well, you know, I don't set out to...
Well, if you write a book with that title, I suggest that you do.
It was a book describing my failure to take Manhattan as a glossy magazine journalist in the mid-90s. But I genuinely thought when I went to New York, I'd soon have, the big apple in the palm of my hand. I was going to be the next kind of journalist to conquer Manhattan, and it all just went horribly wrong, but not intentionally so. It was, and that's why it became a kind of, it's a comic memoir, because I didn't intend to mess up. Bad things just started happening to me.
Some Brits work on that side of the pond and some don't. James Corden is the most massive success in America. I don't know why, but he is. I know, but he is, you know.
I think you've translated better in the United States than I have. I mean, you're a bit of a celeb over there.
I've had a lot of fun over there.
Yeah.
A lot of... I've got some quite well-known friends over there, and that's perhaps helped me a little bit, But I mean, the thing that I'm really interested in, Toby, is this whole free speech thing, and we've kind of touched on it in the last few minutes. The Free Speech Union, cancel culture, the attempt to rewrite virtually every piece of British history. What are we up against here? I mean, are we actually up against that old virus of Marxism that is coming back to try and destroy our identity? Are we up against just a media and social media dominated by the left? Who's the enemy here?
I think it's multifactorial. I think it's partly the triumph of cultural Marxists, particularly in cultural terms, not political terms. I think it's partly the decline of Christianity, and so something has filled the kind of God-shaped hole left by the ebbing of the Christian tide. And
that's climate change, isn't it?
Well, it was climate change, and then it was conforming with all the COVID nonsense, and now it's the church of woke and wokery. I think often when people ask me this question, I think you're coming at it from the wrong angle. It's not, well, what's happened to erode free speech protections. I think the natural human default position is not to tolerate people who challenge your sacred values, who seem to transgress on what's really important to any community. The natural human impulse is to expel them, to cast them out. And that's happened going down through the ages, and we've seen it happen in various totalitarian societies in the 20th century. That's the natural default human reaction, I think, to dissent. And it takes an enormous amount of work, an enormous amount of history and tradition, customs, institutions to protect free speech. And what we've seen is the erosion, the gradual deterioration of those protections. And so we're just defaulting to our much more naturally intolerant state,
Interesting. I mean, I was, I suppose, in a sense, in the forefront of this, because I thought we should leave the European Union, and no one thought we should leave the European Union. And yes, you're sort of cast out. But I thought we'd got past all of that. I thought the point of 2 world wars and huge sacrifice was that we could agree to disagree and do so in a civilized way. You're saying that's really quite a modern thing for mankind?
I think it is fairly modern. I think it's not more than about 200 years old. Okay. And we had a kind of golden period between, the retirement of the Lord Chamberlain as the kind of censor of our theatre in the kind of mid-1960s up until about 5, maybe 10 years ago. A golden period of free speech, and we're now seemingly retreating from that. I mean, I thought free speech was in dire peril in 2020, 2 years ago, almost to the day that I set up the Free Speech Union, and I didn't think things could get any worse. But actually, they've got worse by an order of magnitude, partly as a result of the pandemic, which has seen lots of people who dissent from the prevailing narrative cast out, cancelled, silenced, no platformed, and partly as a result of the BLM protests resulting from George Floyd's death. And that has meant that, I mean, lots of members of the Free Speech Union have found themselves being cancelled, being targeted, being put through various investigations at work because they've inadvertently said something that has upset BLM activists. If you challenge any element of that analysis, that worldview, you're cast as racist and cancelled.
I found this extraordinary. You know, when the George Floyd thing happened, and within 24 hours there are protests in London. I mean, don't tell me there wasn't a degree of organisation and anticipation of an event that would be used. And because of my time in America, which we touched on earlier, you know, I'd seen BLM. I understood what it was. I knew that it was an avowedly Marxist organisation that wanted to bring down Western capitalism, Western civilization, defunding the police force, you know, anarchist, Marxist, dangerous. I knew all of these things. And that wasn't just my opinion. It was on their blooming website.
Yeah.
And yet when I went on TV programmes in this country, I mean, it was as if I'd provoked some sort of extraordinary outrage, that logic, fact had gone out of the window with this hysteria. You see, I wonder, Toby, whether the irrationality of what happened over George Floyd, and you know, we all find the way in which he died despicable. That's not in doubt or question or debate. We're not saying any of that. But I've really wondered hard whether this is because our education system is no longer teaching critical thinking. You know, I mean, I wouldn't say my school career was particularly distinguished. I didn't go to university, but I was at least taught, you know, whether it was in economics or geography or history or English or those, you know, humanity type subjects. You know, I was at least taught from sort of 14, 15, 16, you know, here's a big question, here are two fundamental philosophical approaches to dealing with that question. They're radically different. But, you know, you make your own mind up.
Yeah, I don't think it's just that schools and universities, and I think particularly universities, are no longer teaching students, school children, how to think critically, how to evaluate different claims, how to measure them against the evidence. It's they're actively encouraging children and students not to think that way.
Yes.
I mean, for instance, if you dissent from the idea that Britain is systemically racist, that all black Britons are treated as second-class citizens and don't have anything like the same opportunities across multiple fields as white people. If you challenge that idea, if you even claim that we're a less racist society than we were 25 years ago, without saying everything's rosy in the garden, just that things have improved a bit in the past 25 years, that can get you cancelled at most universities across the country. And I know this because the Free Speech Union gets cries for help from students and academics who've challenged precisely that bit of dogma. We get 25 requests for help a week, and we end up helping about half of them, and sometimes we're successful.
And you yourself finished up being cancelled, didn't you? You know,
I did, yeah.
You were moving into a government position, and you'd done some amazing work on free schools prior to that, but you were described as misogynistic and homophobic. What had you done, Toby?
It was mainly things I'd said on Twitter, sophomoric, late at night after a couple of glasses of this. And back in, 2010, Twitter was more like WhatsApp. You were speaking to your mates, and it was a bit like banter down the pub.
Or you thought you were.
Or so I thought.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realised that this would all be stored, in perpetuity, ready for the offence archaeologist to start sifting through as soon as I was appointed to a government job. I mean, it wasn't a particularly big government job. I was one of 50 non-executive directors of a new university regulator. We're going to meet 4 times a year. It was unpaid.
But it was a big story at the time.
It was it was the biggest story of the week. I mean, incredibly. And that was in the beginning of 2018. I decided naively to apologise and step down from that particular position, thinking that would draw a line under it. But in fact, that was just like throwing red meat to a shoal of piranha fish. And the same outrage mob then came for me in 4 other positions, and I ended up losing 5 positions. I was well and truly cancelled. I even lost my full-time job, couldn't pay the mortgage. And it was partly being in that situation, feeling isolated, not knowing who to turn to for help, for impartial advice, legal advice, career advice. I mean, your career is literally burning to the ground in front of your eyes, and you're panicking. How do I stop this? How do I put it out? And it was the absence of any body to turn to give me that kind of advice and support that was the wellspring of the idea for the Free Speech Union. So now, if someone finds themselves in that position, they can reach out to us and we'll give them the kind of help that I really needed back then.
This level of hatred is extraordinary, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the odd thing about it, Nigel, the irony is that the people who are the most vituperative and unpleasant on Twitter think of themselves as the nice guys. If you look at all the trans rights activists that went after J.K. Rowling just because she wants to defend a traditional definition of the word woman, the unbelievable vituperation, the nastiness, the unpleasantness of all that venom directed towards her on Twitter and elsewhere by the people who think of themselves as the nice people in this debate. And it's like they've given themselves licence to be really unpleasant.
The Liberals, who are wholly illiberal.
We saw it during the Brexit debate as well.
No, well, we did. But, you know, through history, Toby, social pendulums swing back and forth, and we've, seen this, and one thinks of perhaps 17th century Britain being a very good example, where we go from, Puritanism to Hogarth's Gin Lane in the space of about 20 years or whatever it is. I'm not saying either are good, by the way, but does this pendulum swing back?
I hope so. It could just be that we're in a particularly puritanical phase, and the cycle will eventually turn the other way. But you're right, things do change. And that's why I think it's so short-sighted of people on the left to be calling for more censorship of things like jokes. The number of progressive left-wing comedians that have actually called for Jimmy Carr to be prosecuted, reported him to the police for this inappropriate joke he told. It was inappropriate, but it was a joke. And the state should not be deciding, what jokes people can tell and what they can't. But the reason this is so short-sighted, Ira Glasser, the legendary ex-head of the American Civil Liberties Union, back when it was a really militant pro-free speech organisation, said the trouble with speech restrictions is they're a bit like poison gas. You're on the battlefield, you've got the enemy in your sights, and it seems like a good idea to release the poison gas, and then the wind changes. And what's so naive, I think, about all these left-wing, progressive, woke activists calling for censorship is that one day, and in the not-too-distant future, it'll be turned against them.
It happened to us the first day of Battle of Loos, 1915. It can happen. These things can go wrong. Finally, Toby, quickly, you're a known Conservative supporter. You've obviously been around Boris Johnson very often through Spectator and everything else, and like him. Is he going to survive?
I think that his chances of fighting the next general election, which I think he'll, will probably be sooner rather than later, particularly if he's there to call it. I think about 2 weeks ago, they were slightly higher than 50%. I think now they're slightly lower than 50%, but I wouldn't place his prospects any lower than that.
OK, well, we'll see. Toby Young, listen, very passionate defence of free speech. I'm horrified by what you were put through, but you're a brave guy, and I wish you and the Free Speech Union well, and thank you for joining me on Talking Pints.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs, sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
It's my favourite time of the day. The GB News pub is indeed open. They haven't produced a Thatcher's cider for me. I'm very upset with my team. Someone's got to go, that's clear. But never mind. I'm going to welcome Matt Vickers, MP for Stockton South, to Talking Pints. Matt, very good to see you. It's funny, when you get an election like 2019, there's so many new faces, new MPs, in Westminster. It actually takes quite a long time to sort of catch up with them all.
We're different now, though. We used to all look the same, these MPs. Now I think there's different accents, there's different voices, there's different age brackets, so I think we're more memorable, hopefully.
Yes, I mean, there are not quite as many of you that went to Eton and did PPE at Oxford, and I think that had become quite dominant in the Conservative Party. Now, your seat, of course, had been won by a Conservative.
Yeah.
I think back in the 80s.
We'd had one more.
And you had one
more recent. Yeah.
2015, I think, was a guy called James Wharton.
James Wharton, yeah.
So your win wasn't perhaps as surprising as Deanna Davison and some of the others that really... But still, you won it. You took it back off Labour. You'd been in local politics before. So has it been Matt Vickers since he was, just about able to see over this desk? Has becoming an MP been the big life goal?
It wasn't, no, I don't think it was. I've done lots of bits and bobs before I got here. I was quite switched on to politics, though, at a young age.
Yep.
I, got involved, liked to see what was going on in the world around me. I think the bit that really gets you going is if you become a local councillor. You see the little difference you can make to somebody's life, whether it be the pothole at the end of the street, the old lady who contacts you because the tree that's been overgrown, she's contacted the council for the last 6 months and not doing anything. And when you do it and you go back and the smile on their face or the little difference that you can make to somebody is huge. And that's what fires you on to do it.
It also cuts the other way, doesn't it? See, I think a lot of people watching this who've never been involved in local politics and never been councillors perhaps underestimate. It's actually blooming tough.
Yeah.
Being a councillor, because what could matter more to people than their home, their environment, where they live, the condition of the pavements, the roads, where their kids are going to school, all of this stuff. And my observation, I think local councillors get more grief than MPs. When I say grief, I mean, they can't walk to a local shop without a conversation and a debate taking place. No, local politics really matters. It really matters, and I think perhaps we sort of slightly underplay just how much good work thousands of people right across the country do. But you, obviously being in politics, now I know that one of the issues that has sort of raised its head this week is Keir Starmer. Now, what on earth he was doing crossing the main road? Well, he could have used the tunnel under Portcullis House. I don't know. Bad judgment, perhaps. And obviously he's surrounded by that mob, and they were a bit unpleasant. I don't think they meant him any physical harm, but it was not very nice. Obviously, the pretty shocking murder of David Amos, and we're taking this programme to Southend in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll obviously talk about that. And I went through a fair bit of this myself, but then, you know, I was anti-establishment, controversial, so perhaps it wasn't that surprising. It wasn't much fun. Yeah. But you were actually physically assaulted, weren't you?
We did during the election campaign. I think the reality of it is that actually we, as politicians, have some responsibility about the dialogue, about, you know, we talked about Angela Rayner and the whole scum comments, and there's debate around issues, there's debate around people's record, and there's stuff that's just damn nasty. And actually, I think social media has a large part to play in this. I think we've got a chart on the wall now as to how long we haven't had somebody threaten me via Twitter or via the inbox or
do you worry about
the office. I think if you let it bother you, would have a problem because it's so frequent, and you've got to think, you know what, these people are keyboard warriors, 99.9% of them. They're sat at home in the back bedroom.
They're all Victoria Cross winners after a glass of red wine. I mean, no, that is true. But does it bother you? I mean, you know, you've been attacked, assaulted out on a doorstep. Does it bother you when you're in the constituency on a Friday or whatever?
I think, do you know what, to some extent, we cannot ever allow those people to prevent us doing our job, getting out there, seeing people, getting on the doorstep, speaking to people, holding those surgeries. The minute we let that happen, we've got a major problem, and we're letting them win. And moreover, the reason that people are doing it is to put us off what we're trying to achieve. I think part of the reason you probably got as much stick as you did is you were trying to achieve something that a few people didn't really want. In the end, the majority did.
No, a few very influential people didn't want. I mean, that's certainly true. No, I mean, look, I think you're right. We mustn't let them win. But I do think maybe there are arguments in certain situations for MPs to have a couple of bodyguards with them or whatever, because that doesn't separate you from the public. It could, in the right circumstance, actually make you feel more confident to go out and meet them. And I think that's perhaps the debate we're going to have as time goes on. I sort of joked earlier with you, teased you a little bit by saying, you know, you hadn't been to Eton or got a degree in PPE, and you probably don't quote Latin and Greek quotations or Milton or Shakespeare at dinner, as a lot of the posh Tory set do, and I'm sure you've seen it. But I need to ask you this, Matt, because there's a big question right now. What is it to be a Conservative? What is this Conservative party? Because, I mean, let's be frank about it. You know, the punters in South Stockton didn't put you in there for a net zero policy that's going to make them depending on the size of their house, it's going to cost them, goodness knows, 10, 15 grand for a heat pump. They're going to be forced into buying an electric car. They certainly, because they'd be Brexiteers, of course, most of your voters, nearly all of your voters would be Brexiteers. They certainly didn't vote for weakness in Dover, illegal migration. I mean, there's so much happening. There was so much optimism, wasn't there? I felt that Brexit could usher in a new kind of politics. That was the big hope. Get our independence back, have a new kind of politics. And that maybe is the biggest problem. You know, Partygate is a problem, I think. But the biggest problem is somehow it looks like the Tory party has gone back to being what it was. So what is it to be?
Well, let's go with the net zero stuff first.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I don't think we can say green is good or green is bad. I think the minute we get into this, you know, we let the headline go, oh, isn't it terrible, this net zero thing. Actually, I think that we see there are benefits to doing certain green things, you know, whether that be in terms of our energy security, you know, or whether it be in the job creation.
Which we're not doing.
Yeah, in Teesside, we are leading the green revolution. There's thousands of jobs. I don't think we should blindly go in at all costs to do green, to do zero carbon. But we've got to look at each decision in its set.
You can produce green jobs in Teesside, but what you won't get back with this policy, you won't get back aluminium smelting, you won't get back heavy engineering, you won't get back shipbuilding, you won't get back chemicals, refining. So, you know, we can argue this all round the houses.
If we demonise green energy, you know, if we demonise the green agenda completely and we say that actually We're not about energy security and the opportunities that come with it. We're not about the job opportunities that come with it. We want to be at the front and the forefront of green technology. But we do need to do it in a balanced way. Doing net zero at all costs is an absolute ridiculous idea.
I want us to be self-sufficient in energy. I think it's absolutely nuts that we're importing 50% of our natural gas when we could produce it here. Insane that 9% of our electricity some days comes on an interconnector across the English Channel from France. I want those things. But what is it?
The nuclear is the future. Anyway, what is it to be a Tory?
What is it to be a Conservative? To you, what is it to be a Conservative?
I think being a Conservative to me, the reason that I joined this party, I assessed what was going on at a very young age, probably quietly uninformed at the time, seeing what went on, making a decision myself. My parents weren't massively into, but probably still aren't to an extent, into party politics, even though we forced my mum onto the local council. She loves it, though, in the community. But actually, I think it's about individual responsibility. It's about a party that's in government as is on the side of people who do the right thing. If you work hard, you look at the changes to welfare and the reform of welfare and universal credit, the fact that we've got a taper rate now. I remember when I used to manage shops, I had a girl who worked for me. She was fantastic. She was the most energetic, enthusiastic, capable, competent girl. She was a single mum. And in those days, under Blair, if you worked more than 16 hours, you were losing out. So by her doing that, she should have been managing the shop. She couldn't do any more than 16 hours. We cut off ambition, we cut off aspiration, we cut off opportunities. She should have been able to do those extra hours and take something extra home for her son.
I think many of these things that were thought through and worked on by Ian Duncan Smith, amongst others, have been improvements. But, we've got a Tory party now that is big state. We've got a Tory party that has increasingly taken away individual choice and responsibility and said, we know what's best, we can do it for you. We're taxing and redistributing. We're not even taking 5% off, the VAT on our heating bills. And it just feels to me that the Tory party has become a social democrat, big government, high tax and spend party. And I wonder what it's for.
I think, do you know what? It's a government of its time. It's a government that's dealing with completely unprecedented situation of this pandemic. And actually has done a damn good job in real terms. Done a damn good job. I obviously went and rebelled on various measures where I thought they were ridiculous.
Hang on. But this is hilarious, isn't it? You're sitting here defending the Tory party. You've been the biggest blooming rebel there's been of the whole of the 2019 intake.
Do you know what? We expected to get to the end of this pandemic and we expected mass unemployment. Actually, we're in a really good place. We're coming at the fastest growing economy in the G7. Employment better off than when we went in, more people in work. We've avoided that and we're in a good way. And the vaccine rollout means the pubs are open, the shops are open.
I'd be very, very careful about those employment figures that the Prime Minister spouts again and again and again, because they take no account. That's PAYE numbers. Takes no account of the number of self-employed people that are packed up and gone out of business. And they're a big number. So
in real terms, unemployment is nowhere near what we expected when we came out. The economy is in good shape because of the measures we put in to support the economy. But moreover, actually, if we hadn't had that vaccine rollout now, we would still be walking around here with daft masks on doing all that malarkey, wouldn't we? This might be considered a party now. Pints on the table.
Well, I'm not Prime Minister. I'm not making the rules. Partygate's not gone away, has it?
It hasn't. And you know what? I shared the experience of having somebody who we lost, couldn't visit them in hospital, couldn't attend a funeral, and I understand the anger of people on that front. It's there. I've made my sounds to government about that issue. At the same time, I was out there at the weekend. For all the anger that some people have about it, the other people are angry about the fact that we spend most time on a television show like this or reading through the newspaper talking about this thing when we've got issues in Russia and Ukraine, we've got issues with the cost of living, we've got issues. They want to get on with some of the big things.
But there is an issue of trust. And Boris has been... his relationship with the truth is a very interesting debate, isn't it? He has said things again and again and again that have proved to be wholly wrong. And I think what he's lost, and he'll have lost it with some of your constituents, is trust. And when you've lost trust, winning it back is hard. I mean, do you think he's going to stay?
Do you know what I want to do? I think trial by media is a really bad thing. I'm angry about some of the things that have come out, but at the same time, I think it's right that we see what the Sue Gray report says in full. We see what the police say about it, because actually, was it last weekend the media were having a debate as to whether there was or there wasn't a cake? Trial by media is a really bad thing. We see one thing I've learned from this job is never believe all of the things you read on social media or in a newspaper. Crikey, have you seen the stuff that gets printed in the Mirror?
I've seen loads of it over the years.
Let's see what the police say. Let's see what Sue Gray says. And make informed opinions about these things.
And this could drag on for God knows how long.
I agree. We want it moving, and we want it moving now. We want to see that Sue Gray report in full, and we want the police to investigate quickly.
It's agony.
It is agony.
I mean, it's not good, is it?
It's not good, and it hangs over government. It distracts
everybody. I do accept your point that, you know, as this pandemic bore down upon us, I mean, this was a very difficult thing for government to deal with. And I get that, understand that, but despite all of that, you know, there's a feeling that promises haven't been kept.
Well, the big promise is levelling up, isn't it? Delivering Brexit and levelling up. Those are the big promises.
And what is levelling up? Is levelling up giving money to the North, which is what some Conservatives seem to think it is, or is levelling up creating opportunities in the North? Which is it?
Well, we give money to create opportunities for economic growth, to create... So in my part of the world, we've had all sorts. I'll come to Stockton South, I'll get you a car and I'll show you what levelling up is. We've got improvements to the local train station. We've got Treasury jobs from the Treasury that have been based in London coming up to us. Not only are they great, well-paid jobs, but actually it means we're moving decision-makers up there. We've got the first free port, the UK's biggest free port, and you've got Teesside, 18,000 jobs.
And you've got Ben Houchen, who has becoming the most prominent local politician in the Conservative movement in this country. And I have to tell you, I watched him the other day and I thought, yeah, I get that. I like that. I really understand what he's trying to do.
He's firing on all cylinders.
Because I think he understands the creation of opportunity. And yet, when I listen to Sunak and Gove, I feel it's almost like a Labour Party. You know, a Labour Party of 30, 40 years ago, who think just chuck some money here and there and it's all going to happen. Matt, what are your ambitions?
What are my ambitions?
Yeah.
To be so I was born and raised in Stockton South. When I go out knocking on them doors, I'm knocking on people I went to school with. I get down the street to someone who I worked with.
And they still vote for you?
Well, some of them do. Not all, I don't think, but some of them do. And I think, do you know what? That job, to have that huge privilege and honour is absolutely amazing. To be able to go back there and have
they all say that. They all say that. I believe you, honestly. Of course, they do. What are your ambitions in politics?
My ambitions is to deliver for the people of Stockton South. I've been there 2 years, and we're levelling up.
I don't want all that tosh. Everyone says that.
You know what? I think if you think that everybody who goes in there wants to climb and do this and do that, then you're wrong, because actually, some of us just want to do a damn good job of it. We've been given an enormous privilege and pleasure and honour. Hopefully, I'll be there long enough to do even more than I've already achieved, but I'll be striving to do that. And if not, then I know I've done it. So whatever I could in my time.
If climbing the greasy pole is not your ambition, what's the one big change you'd like to see in our country that you want to fight for?
I go into schools every week, and we have a discussion about how we should change the law. They always suggest that we should change the law so that we have our desserts before we have our mains. What I want to deliver, it's not national politics necessarily. There's lots of things I do want to change. I've had my impact on assaults on retail workers and those delivering a service to the public. But actually, I think it's about delivering at home. It's about bringing things back up to the north, doing that levelling up thing that we set out to do. We've already achieved that big Brexit thing, thanks to lots of people.
No, the Brexit thing leaves us free to do all sorts of things. I'd love to see levelling up. I still don't fully understand what it means.
Right. Get yourself up to Stockton South. I'll show you it all.
I tell you what, I'll come and see Stockton South. Matt Vickers, thank you for joining me.
Cheers.
On Talking Pints. Very good. Good to see you. Thank you.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's that time of the day, thank goodness. The GB News pub is open. It's Talking Pints. I'm joined by Lord Hesketh. Alexander, welcome.
Nigel, pleasure and privilege to be here.
Good to see you. Now, I've only got about 14 or 15 minutes to talk to you, but your life has been so interesting and so full of ups and downs, we could pursue this for much, much longer. But what is it that makes a member of the aristocracy run away from school at 15 and become a second-hand car dealer?
Well, experienced the educational process that, in terms of interest, that I think an awful lot of people at school, wherever they went to school, suffered.
What, did you just hate school?
No, I got bored. I was bored out of my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple as that.
So off you go.
I was a useless student. And I tried to join the army, but I got failed by a retired medical officer of the Pioneer Corps. And my mother was horrified. So I went to America, before which I was also briefly a second-hand car dealer.
Right, OK. So second-hand car dealing led you into a form of entrepreneurship, and you were off to America and Hong Kong. And did you enjoy the business world? I enjoyed America and Hong Kong because there was a freedom of thought, a complete lack of structure in the way that existed. We're talking about the 70s. We're talking about a Britain which really had an awful lot in it that was still the Second World War, particularly in terms of taxation, the opportunity to do what you wanted to do, the chance to get on, the opportunity to raise money, virtually non-existent, unless you put your house on the line with your local bank, and that was all you could do. And I found America a tremendously opening experience to how to think. And in Hong Kong, people are sometimes rude about the civil service, but it's important to remember that one civil servant created the structure in Hong Kong, a man from the colonial office, as it was in those days, which transformed it into one of the economic powerhouses of the world, which has now been destroyed by communism. Yeah, I mean, it's desperately sad, isn't it, to see what's happened to Hong Kong?
It's sad and outrageous, actually.
Yeah, they've broken the deal, haven't they?
Of course they have.
I mean, that deal was signed in good faith. Until 2047, Hong Kong was going to have autonomy, but none of it. No, it is sad. And I get your point, because in the 70s, there was the brain drain from this country. This was a very restrictive, outdated country. It was tough to get on and do things. And a lot of people went all over the world, as you did, to do things. But, of course, you know, the thing that people are always going to know you for, above all, is motor racing, Hesketh motor racing. And still, years on at Formula One, your teddy bear logo can be seen on people's shirts. And, I mean, was it madness? Was it, here it is, Hesketh Racing. Was it madness to go for Formula One, looking back on it?
Well, firstly, I didn't go for Formula One.
No, of course.
I had a friend who took me to a barn outside Guildford to see a Formula 3 car that he was having built. I mean, it was it was surrounded by straw bales. I mean, it was as cheap a car as you could build. Take it from me now. It didn't work very well, and he discovered that Formula 3 had become quicker than when he'd last been in it.
Alexander Hesketh, thank you for joining me here.
Nigel, thank you very much.
Thank you. To the Special Investigations Editor of the Daily Mail, Sue Reed. Sue, welcome to Talking Pints. Very good to see you here. Now, you grew up in this area.
I did. I grew up 5 miles away in St Anne's. But this was our playground. Blackpool was our playground. And Blackpool is and was a fantastic town to be growing up in. We used to come here as teenagers. I spent my 17th birthday at the Pleasure Beach after a lunch at home, going round and round in the ghost train. I can't tell you what else happened. But we had fun here, and you walked on the front here, and we call it the front, of course, don't we? And literally, there were rock stars here, pop stars, because playing Blackpool was bigger than playing the Palladium. I mean, this is the place where the Rolling Stones were banned from after the Glaswegians arrived for their Wakes Week, stormed the stage, and the Rolling Stones piano was thrown into the auditorium. The Rolling Stones were blamed, not the Glaswegians. And the Beatles played 3 times here in '65. I know that sounds a long time ago, but I tell you, this place rocked.
And I guess
it was successful, it was great, it was upbeat, and of course the people have never changed.
Was it foreign travel that really...
Yes, it was in the 70s.
Did for it, and people made different choices and all the rest of it. You've been away, you've had a very successful career in journalism, you've done some very tough things. I mean, you've covered stories that are not easy to cover. You've covered child trafficking, you've covered the illegal migration crisis, you've covered the grooming, the terrible grooming that took place in some of our northern cities. Do you ever feel you're doing something that's really rather dangerous?
Well, I know that I'm doing something dangerous, but I do think these are important issues to be addressed. And I'm not being a saint about that, but people have to know what's going on, don't they? That is how it should be. I mean, the reason I became interested in migration is because the Daily Mail rang me a very long time ago. And I was a stay-at-home mum, I was working for the Sunday Times, and they said, can you get in a lorry and come over from Calais to show how easy it is? And I thought, yes. So I went to Calais, I met I chatted up lots of lorry drivers, and there was one from Warrington who was an independent lorry driver, and he said, I'll put you on board. And of course, being near Lancashire, we got on, you see. And so he put me on board, and we set off. We went through the Calais security at the port. We got through to Dover. I was sitting there saying, this is easy. We were driving up the motorway up to London when we heard, and he said, it's one of my tires, but it doesn't matter, I've got 6 on either side. And all the time I'd been in there, there'd been a guy, or indeed we didn't know who was in there, was lying on top of the 8 pallets, big driving, big pallets. He was lying on the top, and as I say, we didn't know it was one person then, but when we opened the door and he came round, the driver, with a great big torch ready to hit to us, we just heard, please help me. Please help me. Out came Adele from Iraq. He ran away in the darkness. And then I realised how jolly easy it is. I'd been in there for 4 hours with a guy lying completely still. And that was when I began to take an interest.
And now they're coming, because of sort of, body heat equipment or whatever it may be, they're now coming across the channel in small boats. It's an issue that I've followed. It's an issue that you followed. And we're told now the Home Office this year are expecting 65,000 to 90,000
I think you predicted that last year, and I think it's going to be absolutely true. And the idea that we can... these traffickers, these evil, evil traffickers are embedded. They've had 20 years to embed. The idea that we can... Well, I hope we can do something about it, but it's a pretty...
Well, the Australians did. The Australians just towed the people back to Indonesia.
Yeah.
And Tony Abbott, the Aussie PM, was condemned for it, but it worked.
It did work.
We've got to do something. And I think these folk here are getting pretty upset, all over the country getting pretty upset. You know, we want good people to come to the country, but not illegally. I mean, the whole thing is outrageous.
The point I make all the time, and I have made it at a very, very high level with the government, is the security. We don't know who's coming in.
Yeah.
When I walked into Berlin with the first Syrians in 2015 in September, the first thing those young Syrians said to me, most of us aren't Syrian. 2/3 of us are not Syrian. You do realise this. And we're very worried that we're going to be cast aside because of all these other people. And we're talking about a myriad of different nationalities. And I wrote that. I said it then. 2/3 of people coming in are coming in, they're bogus.
Yeah.
Now, they, of course, have been milling around Europe all the time. Even Cameron said at the time 2% are likely to be IS.
I know.
He said it to the Lebanese camp.
It's horrifying, isn't it?
And we just never ask, and in they come.
So
and that's what I'm worried about, the security aspect of it.
I think you're very brave what you do. You've done some fantastic work in the Daily Mail over many years, particularly over the last year, and you've tracked what's happening across in France and where the boats are coming from, and it's brilliant stuff. On personal stuff, just very quickly, you know, I know that you lost your partner during the pandemic, and it's been a tough time. He was a friend of Boris Johnson's. Just finally, Sue, should Boris stay? Should he go? How do you feel about what's been happening?
I feel very, very concerned that people in the top of government are not representing ordinary people, or indeed have any connection with ordinary people, that it is coming from a completely different mindset. People who really, they may have come to Blackpool today, and I don't mean to, and thank goodness they did, but when did they last step in? You know, to see Blackpool. When did they last see our northern towns? You know, there's so much potential here. And unfortunately, I think the people at the top have no idea.
But Boris kind of in 2019 did get a lot of votes in towns like Blackpool.
He did.
And people liked him.
Of course, he's
Should they still like him?
I think they should be very disappointed. I think it's a tragedy that these promises have not been kept. On energy, my goodness, everyone's going to feel it. Everyone is going to feel it. And on a myriad, actually, of things that were promised.
And when you saw the
fracking, for instance, by the way.
Well, fracking, I mean, we've had a fair debate about that. I sense there's less opposition here now than there might have been a few years ago. I'm sure there are some who are still very concerned. But it's kind of levelling up. We saw Michael Gove with his levelling up paper. I mean,
Look, I tell you, how you level up is start educating properly. Instead of having enterprise zones, have school super zones. Bring those children on. We are wasting our children. It doesn't matter whether you come from a castle or a council house. 2% are going to be bright. Many are going to be average. Some are going to need extra help, but it doesn't matter. We need to... They are the strength, not infrastructure. I've seen better education under a tree in Zimbabwe. In Soweto, where algebra goes round the walls. Believe me, I tell you, it's the people we have to...
so education, bringing back jobs. Can Blackpool see great days again?
I hope so. I really hope so. It really would make me incredibly happy.
Brilliant. Sue Reed, thank you very much for joining me on Talking Pints.
OK, looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy and breezy for most, with rain continuing to spread eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. A front sits across the southwest this evening, so you can expect a damp evening there. A little calmer though, still unpleasant at times on the moors, particularly during heavier downpours. Further east, after a relatively dry day, rain will start to affect many parts of the southeast, though it will be largely light. Over in South Wales, after a rather wet day, the rain will ease for a time and it will turn a little calmer as well. Over in the Midlands next, and it'll be a mixed picture there. Cloudy and breezy for many, with rain continuing at first, though it will likely turn a little drier by night time, staying mild too. Moving further north, where things stay rather windy in the northeast of England this evening, with a mix of clear spells and showery rain that may be quite heavy in times, as well as being unpleasant. Now, even further north to South Scotland, where it will be changeable this evening. Expect some heavy and blustery showers at times, but also the odd clear and colder spell. Finally, let's look at the details for Northern Ireland. It'll turn a bit calmer and drier for many, though once again short-lived and heavy showers will push through. For the rest of the night, things will change again as more heavy rain and gusty winds will push up from the south. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most